I'm at the point with my MS that I'm like a little kid. I'm always asking, why, why, why? Well, hello and welcome to another episode of You and Me and Multiple Sclerosis. My name is Pam. I've been living with multiple sclerosis for 39 years. And lately I've been seeing an awful lot of research that's maybe building block more than great, breakthroughs that are going to allow us to have new and better treatments and possibly even cures. But all these building blocks behind the scenes, over time, I think they will add up to something. I want to share a couple of the articles that I saw today and then just give you a little bit of an observation after that. So let's go ahead and take a look. Well, this first article is from the American Brain Foundation on March 19, 2024, and it's called Neuroinflammation and Multiple Sclerosis, which is a nice general title, but let's see what they have to say. I'm just going to skip to the important stuff. Neuroinflammation, swelling in the brain and spinal cord, is involved in everything from the nerve damage that causes MS to the worsening of symptoms over time. For people with MS, neuroinflammation plays a significant role in the demyelination process, the process where the protective coating around nerves, or myelin, breaks down and causes the movement symptoms of MS. Because of neuroinflammation's connection to nearly every brain disease and many bodily processes, the American Brain Foundation has launched a new research initiative in partnership with a number of disease-specific research and patient advocacy organizations, including the National MS Society. This initiative aims to better understand neuroinflammation as an underlying mechanism of brain disease and brain health. So what is neuroinflammation? Inflammation is the immune system's natural response to injury, illness, or infection. Neuroinflammation is an inflammatory response that takes place in the brain and spinal cord. This inflammation can be a protective response, but in the case of many brain diseases, it is the result of faulty autoimmune response that causes damage to the brain and nervous system. Research shows that prolonged or excessive inflammation may be a key driver in the onset and progression of several neurologic diseases and disorders, including MS. In people with MS, nerve damage takes place in the brain and can extend to the rest of the central nervous system. Treating inflammation is important because it may have an impact on a person's symptoms and disease progression. The question is MS caused by inflammation in the brain? Not exactly. MS is believed to be an autoimmune disease in which the body's immune system attacks its own tissues. The disease affects 2.5 million people worldwide and about 1 million Americans, and as many as 10,000 new cases are diagnosed each year. It is a chronic disease with unpredictable attacks. While inflammation is part of the autoimmune response linked to the disease, scientists don't know exactly what causes MS. While there is evidence that the Epstein-Barr virus is associated with an increased risk of MS, scientists still don't know for sure whether certain viruses can trigger the disease, how to prevent it, what predicts the course of the disease, or when an attack will happen. What they do know is that people with MS experience inflammation in the brain and spinal cord, and this inflammation contributes to demyelination, damage to myelin, the protective coating around nerves. Microglia, immune cells in the central nervous system, are often present at sites of demyelination. Research shows that these immune cells may play an active role in the process of demyelination in MS. So the microglia are implicated in demyelination. Yes, well, that's kind of the smoldering MS thing, right? Activated microglia can contribute to neuroinflammation by releasing substances that affect surrounding cells. When demyelination occurs, it disrupts communication between brain and other parts of the body. This interruption is what causes symptoms of MS, such as muscle weakness, fatigue, and balance problems. People with MS often experience distinct attacks where symptoms get worse and then subside, which creates unpredictability for those living with this brain disease. Over time, high levels of neuroinflammation may accelerate brain aging and contribute to the progression of brain disease, drawing a connection between neuroinflammation and neurodegeneration, which makes total sense. And then they go on to talk about treating nervous system inflammation may reduce MS symptoms. Scientists have established links between an autoimmune response, neuroinflammation, demyelination, and neurodegeneration. More research will clarify exactly how these factors are connected and how targeting them can lead to better treatments for MS. Now, this little paragraph here, it's not really new, but at the same time, we haven't really seen any good solutions come out of that knowledge, so perhaps this new initiative will advance us toward that goal. That would be nice. MS, we think, is an autoimmune disease, and we have a number of autoimmune diseases, says Raymond Ruse, MD, previous member of the Foundation's Research Advisory Committee and the director of Amyotrophic Lateral Sclerosis Clinic and the Marjorie and Robert E. Strauss Professor in Neurological Science. I think if we understand MS, it will bring us closer to understanding many autoimmune and neuroinflammatory diseases. Okay, well, that's interesting. So they're thinking that MS, if you can cure that, you can also apply what you learned to curing many other diseases as well, which is interesting. Don't normally hear it go in that direction, but that's kind of interesting. And I'm glad they're focusing on MS. Selfishly, I will have to say that. Okay, understanding neuroinflammation better can help researchers and doctors know where, when, and how to increase or decrease inflammation within the central nervous system. Regulating inflammation could improve treatments for many different brain diseases, including MS. While there is no cure for MS, researchers are exploring how to reduce the immune response that triggers neuroinflammation as a way to improve symptoms and slow the disease's progression. A recent study identified an immune system regulator in the gut microbiome that may contribute to the autoimmune response and inflammation that are characteristics of MS. Now, they don't cite this paper, but I'm going to pull up another one here in a minute that I think might be the one. Anyway, but they go on to say, by targeting neuroinflammation, researchers hope to make early interventions that prevent or slow damage to the nerves in the first place. The topic of neuroinflammation is central to the American Brain Foundation's 2025 Cure One, Cure Many Award. Our new neuroinflammation initiative provides funding to the world's top researchers to pursue innovative approaches to brain disease diagnosis and treatment. With its unprecedented cross-industry collaboration, this research initiative promises to transform the future of brain health. And wouldn't that be nice if that were indeed true? Now, as I said earlier, they had referred to a study, though they did not cite it, and I'm wondering if this might be the one. I saw this in Multiple Sclerosis News today, and it's called Gut Bacteria May Be Key to Activate Immune Cells That Trigger Multiple Sclerosis. New mouse study findings may lead to therapy options in the long term. And it was published in July of 2023. So it's not exactly cutting edge, but it's probably still very newsworthy. They say pro-inflammatory immune cells that can target the brain may be activated in a specific region of the intestine by certain gut bacteria before migrating to the brain, according to a new study done in mice. And this underscores what I've said all along, that our body is a whole entire system. And when we go to a neurologist, they look at our brain and our spinal cord, and they're mainly interested in nerves. But you can see here that there's a huge effect that the rest of our body has on our nervous system and vice versa. And this is what they're looking at here. Researchers say these findings provide a proof of concept for how some immune cells may become activated to trigger the inflammatory attack on the brain and spinal cord that causes multiple sclerosis. Our results make an important contribution to better understanding the development of multiple sclerosis and potentially open up new therapy options in the long term. Naoto Kawakami, PhD, the study's senior author from the University of Munich Hospital in Germany, said in a university press release. The study, visualizing the activation of encephalitogenic T cells in the ileal lamina propria by in vivo two-photon imaging, was published in the journal PNAS, and I don't think we'll bother looking at that paper exactly, although I'll link it below. I just kind of get a feel from the title that it's going to be awash with technical terminology that we're going to have a hard time wading through. So I appreciate the article from these folks that will actually help us understand what that research is all about. And they go on to ask, what is the role of gut bacteria in triggering MS? T cells, our good friend the T cell, are a type of immune cell with key roles in controlling inflammation. Each T cell is equipped with a specialized receptor called a T cell receptor, or TCR, that is able to bind to a specific molecular target, like a piece of virus or bacteria. When a T cell's receptor binds to its target, it triggers the cell to go on the attack, launching an inflammatory response to deal with the threat. In MS, abnormal inflammation in the brain and spinal cord causes damage to the myelin sheath, a fatty coating that covers and protects nerve fibers, helping them to send electrical signals. MS patients frequently have T cells with receptors that bind to parts of the myelin sheath. These self-targeting T cells are thought to be centrally involved in driving the disorder. However, T cells with receptors that bind to myelin are also found in people who show no signs of MS. This suggests that the presence of these cells alone is insufficient to cause the neurodegenerative disorder. Other factors must be at play, according to researchers, which in some cases may trigger these cells to go into the brain and launch an inflammatory attack. But what these factors might be has long been a mystery. In this study, scientists engineered mouse T cells so they would be equipped with a receptor that binds to myelin oligodendrocyte glycoprotein, or MOG, a component of the myelin sheath that's often targeted by T cells in MS. The team then injected these cells into mice and used advanced imaging technology to monitor their movement and activation within the animals' bodies. Through these experiments, they found that myelin-targeting T cells became activated in the ileal lamina propria, a connective tissue layer in the small intestine. I'm glad they explained what that was. I don't think I've ever heard that term in my life. Researchers then put the myelin-targeting cells into mice that lacked a gut microbiome, which is the community of bacteria and other microorganisms that normally lives in the digestive system. In these mice, myelin-targeting T cells did not become activated in the ileal LP, demonstrating that their activation in this specific part of the gut depended on the presence of gut microorganisms. Treating mice with an antibody that blocked MHC class II, a protein that other types of immune cells use to help T cells recognize their targets, likewise blocked T cell activation in the ileal LP, the team also found. These data show direct evidence to confirm the pivotal role of microbiota in T cell stimulation and highlight the important role of MHC class II that researchers wrote. And then they go on to talk about findings that provide proof of concept for how T cells become activated. Scientists speculated that myelin-specific T cells may become activated in the gut because some gut bacteria have proteins that are shaped similarly to myelin, allowing the cell's receptors to bind to the bacteria and trigger inflammatory activation. But they stressed that further research is needed to test this idea and identify the specific bacteria that may play that role. The team also found that T cells with receptors against some non-myelin targets were also activated in the ileal LP, but only in mice with an intact microbiome, suggesting that this phenomenon may not be exclusive to cells that drive MS. Interestingly, activation in the lamina propria seems to be a general mechanism, as even for non-myelin targeting T cells, which target other molecules in the body, we found that activation depended on the microbiome, Kawakami said. Scientists next conducted studies in which they tracked the movement of T cells, leaving the ileal LP to see where they went next. They found that myelin-targeting cells activated in this part of the gut were then able to migrate into the brain and spinal cord. I think this is an important insight that they've discovered, because we've always thought about the blood-brain barrier and how a lot of the MS trouble comes from the fact that things are getting into our brain that shouldn't be there. At the same time, they started to turn on several genes characteristic of Th17 cells, a specific type of T cell that's been heavily implicated in the development of MS. Taken together, these data provide a proof of concept for how myelin-targeting T cells might become activated and migrate into the brain, where they would launch an inflammatory attack that ultimately would lead to the development of MS, the team concluded. Okay, well, what it looks like to me, especially based on this second article, is that what they're postulating is these T cells, which we've heard about this forever. It was one of the first things I learned about MS, was that you had these T cells that were acting out and doing bad things, and medicines were targeted at trying to stop them, neutralize them, or even convert them into being beneficial. But why exactly did this happen? We don't know. Well, this second article seems to be saying that the problem happens in our gut because a certain bacteria, and they haven't figured out which one, but some bacteria that the T cells are supposed to go after in the gut, and it's all well and fine. Everything works great, except that then those T cells somehow migrate up into the brain past the blood-brain barrier, and that there is something in myelin that is similar enough to this bacteria that the T cells, thinking they're doing a good thing, start attacking the myelin. Interesting, isn't it? If it's true, I think it does open up a whole new line of research and a whole new line of possibilities for treating MS. And so we will have to wait and see, but I'll keep you posted if I see anything new. And that's all I have for you today. So in the meantime, take really good care of yourself. Let's stay as healthy as we can, so when this cure finally comes, we'll be ready.